Andrew, you're a bit of an outlier in the energy industry in the sense that a lot of the leaders are very traditional and have engineering backgrounds. When we look at the leaders of the super majors and some of the other service companies, you, on the other hand, studied economic history at Cardiff and then became an internal auditor. So what makes you so qualified to be able to lead, some of the world's largest energy companies, let alone a French company such as Schlumberger?
Well, firstly, I didn't decide I was going to lead it, by the way.
Yeah.
A lot of other people decided that for me, right? But I joined Schlumberger, yes, in finance, and actually out of the 37 years I spent, about a third in finance and 2/3 in general management. And the idea that I moved from finance to management came very, very early. It came when I was controller of the Far East wireline unit. And for a long time, nothing happened. And then finally, they asked Jean Ribou, who was the chairman at the time, called me into his office and said, if you stay in finance waiting for the CFO to drop dead, you're going to get very bored. He said, so you got to go into management. And he actually, Jean Ribou, was even worse than me. His background was in literature.
Okay.
So I said to him, okay, but you want me to go into a business that's highly technical. How do you manage? And he said, well, I manage basically by choosing three. He said, there are two types of scientists. There are those scientists who can explain what they're doing and you understand, and there's those who explain what they're doing and you don't understand a single word. So he said, you have to carefully choose the people that you use to understand what's going on. And that sort of got, because Ribou died and there was a change of CEO, there was a big crisis around Fairchild Semiconductor, nothing happened for 4 or 5 years. And then finally they said to me, would you go into management? And I said, yes. And I said, but I'm so fed up with you jerking me around. I'm going, I'm not going, and all the rest of it, that I want to choose where I want going. So I said, I want to go to the drilling company because I reckoned I could understand how a drill rig works without too much technical education, right? So I went to Sedco Forex, and then 3 years later, this CEO called me in and said, I want you to go and run the wireline. And the wireline is the most technical business in Schlumberger. And I said, are you sure? And he said, yes. So I went there and nobody talked to me for 3 weeks.
Why is that?
Well, they said, what is this guy with an economic history degree going to do, amongst all us physicists and mathematicians, right?
Yeah. And why had the CEO earmarked you to go into that part of the business?
Because you couldn't at that time, it's not true anymore, but at that time you could not be the CEO of Schlumberger unless the wireline accepted you.
Okay. So you were being groomed
Yes.
for how many years before?
Okay, so you're jumping ahead to other questions.
Okay.
But,
All right. Okay, I'll let you carry on.
When Ribou called me into his office, he said, you have to go and do management, otherwise you'll be bored. And I was 35, right? And he said to me, you are one of a group of people who might replace me one day. And I walked out of there saying, this guy's nuts. He doesn't know me. He knows nothing about me. And here he is speculating that I might be one of the people that replace him one day. And actually, for a long, long time, I didn't understand how that perception came to him. But once I was CEO, I did. Because we'll get onto the question of how you identify leaders. But actually, people with leadership qualities are fairly obvious. And I was being identified for 2 reasons. Because you asked me to ask the head of personnel at the time, so I did.
Yes.
And the reason I was being is because I never showed any of the traditional traits of the financial guy with his head in the books, producing numbers and bad news or good news, as the case may be. I always showed an interest in the business all around me. So they said, this guy's got much more in him than just being a controller. And the other thing was that they or Ribou and another boss I had said, this guy's a natural leader. So, it was identified long time before I had any notion And actually, I was in competition with another guy for a very long time, and I thought he was an engineer and all the rest of it. I think he's going to get it. I'm just going to be the also-ran. But it didn't work out that way. So, and when I went to the wireline, I'm not happy unless I really quite understand what I'm doing and why, what works. So I actually spent a lot of time self-studying physics, particularly. And, I'm not, when you're doing wireline, it's not just a question of understanding the physical principle that makes the measurement. You have, as they're all indirect measurements, you have to understand the interpretation of the measurement that is necessary in order to produce a result for the customer.
Right.
But I spent a huge amount of time personally studying at least the basics, which gave me enough knowledge to be able to talk intelligently or reasonably intelligently with the R&D folks.
Right. So you said that you had been identified in quotes as a natural leader.
Yeah.
What are the qualities of a natural leader?
Well, I think that some confidence in your capacity to manage other people without excessive need to put pressure on other people, that you convince by your arguments and your personality without having to give direct orders. There is a joke, there was a joke in Schlumberger which my CFO, who is Lebanese, used to say, and I never realized this until he said it. But he said, if Andrew's going like this, then his mind is still completely open. If he starts going like this, the mind is closing. And if he goes like this, you better agree. So I had a phrase which everybody knew, which was, if I were you, I would do this. And in fact, one of the very high potential women said to me at the end, she said, I never realized that when you said, if I were you, that was actually a very strong piece of advice. I thought it was just an opinion. So,
Yes.
So I think that natural leaders can lead without having to dictate what needs to be done. They can lead through their personality, and you can actually recognize it quite early if you look for the signs. It doesn't always work, but you can see similar traits in other people.